Hi, this goes back to a topic I've talked about a little bit before about sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me, or words will never hurt me. Well, guess what? They do. And that has to do with families and parents and how things go with you. I try to remind you all the time that what you hear stays in there forever. And that can be an issue. So I'm going to tell you one of the stories. They say a friend of mine said last week. She said something about her husband having issues with the kid, with the parents. And I said, as a kid with the parents. And I said, I said, a lot of people do. And I said, you don't know how many times I've heard somebody in my group, individual counseling, whatever, saying, hey, my mother said she never planned on having us, or my father disappeared when I was born, etc. I'm going to tell you a story that hurts, and hurts a lot. Uh, I do domestic violence batterers programs in Beverly Hills, and we're dealing with emotional violence more than physical in Beverly Hills. A lot of places it's more physical, but I get a lot of the emotional and verbal violence. When people come into the group, I keep a small group. We only have about 40 people at a time enrolled, and I'll say to them, hey, when you come in here, there's a bunch of things you got to understand. Number one, some of you are going to make some positive change. Some of you are going to make changes only because you don't want to get in trouble again. And some of you come in as jerks or other words I could use. And I can't do anything about that. A few years ago, here's a story about one that is very traumatic. Because when I tell these people that, I said, in the years I've been doing this, 20 years, I've had um, 4 people murder somebody. I said 2 of them signed up and we never saw them again. But 2 of them finished the program and still murdered somebody. Now, our ratio is pretty good in comparison to other programs that have a lot more. You'd be amazed how many domestic violence cases end up in one or the other death. This case was special because it was a young gentleman who came here to do entertainment in Beverly Hills. What a surprise. And in the music business. And he was talented and he was good. And when he got done, I said, Barry, I said, the last session, I said, we're wrapping it up today. And I said, if you are careful and stay sober, because your drinking and alcohol was the big problem before, I said, if you stay sober, you should have a pretty good life and a good relationship. I said, please be careful. Well, I had an intern get involved about 4 years later. And she called me and she said, do you remember Barry? I said, oh, yeah. She said, well, he was just arrested for murder. And she said, I'm working with the sheriffs or whatever right now. I'm like, really? Well, it turns out, you know, come on, folks, you have to understand, moms usually stay with the kids because it's kind of harder to. Dads often will leave. His was one of those. The men are always like, oh, the rules have changed and they're not fair. But the truth is, it still is an ongoing issue. A lot of times, they say the woman gets stuck with the babies in the beginning or the baby. And in his case, in Barry's case, mom and dad never got married. Um, they just had a hell of a time and she got pregnant, the infamous words that get used. She got pregnant and he was born. And dad took off immediately. And Barry never saw his dad, never met his dad, never knew much of anything about his dad, other than to hear from mom what an asshole his dad was, what a loser he was, how mad she was that she was stuck with him and that he was able to leave. And she even said from time to time, I wish I didn't have to keep you, but I had no choice. I wish I could give you to somebody else. Then she in turn came up with a new way of doing it. She brought her sister in because they both had to work to keep finances going and raise the child, okay? So her sister, of course, at that point, Barry's aunt, the 2 of them raised him. He was a little bit rebellious. He wanted to go into the music business. He wanted to write music, etc., etc. And he had lots of reasons that force them to say, don't look at me like that. Remember, I didn't want you. Remember, remember, remember. And there was some anger that built up, obviously. He got into a fight with his girlfriend. That's where I got in touch with him. Um, and he got into a fight with this particular girlfriend. They were both wasted and drunk, and there were some issues. And he got dragged to the police station. He ended up being sent to me for the year. At the end of the year, as I said, I sat there and said, Barry, if you can stay sober, you're going to do great. Because he really took ownership. He looked in the mirror and said, you know what? Yeah, I do have issues. I am angry at my father for leaving, whoever he is, wherever he is. Mom never would tell him anything about the dad. And he said, I was angry at my mother and my aunt for being so physical, whacking me around and whatever. And he said, but now I'm going to be okay. And I was like, good. But when my intern came in and said, guess what? That he'd killed his current girlfriend, I had to find out more. And what I found out was that, guess what? Barry had gone back to drugs again, and he was primarily drugged up the night that this happened. And this is where the sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. He heard some words out of his girlfriend that his mother or his aunt used to say. I don't know what the words were, to tell you the truth. All I know is they were into an argument, and she said some things, and she cried later on. She said, I can't believe, not she cried, he cried later on, I can't believe that she said that. And he said it triggered in his mind that it was his mother, and he went over and strangled her. He wanted his mother dead. He was so angry with her for the first 35 years of his life. Unfortunately, it wasn't his mom. She used some of those words that mom had said, but it wasn't mom. And it wasn't until the police got there and he was crying with his hands over around his girlfriend, trying to wake her up and saying, oh my God, I killed my girlfriend. I killed my love. I killed her. I killed her. And they said, yeah, looks like you did. And he was not wanting to kill her. He really thought it was his mom. And when the police came in, he was crying. He was crying. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe it. I mean, he was ready to go to the gas chamber or whatever it took. He wasn't caring. He was done. And I remember the infamous words at the end of our session of the 52-week program. Barry, if you stay sober, you're going to have a good relationship and have a good life. And he didn't. So be careful, kids. Every one of you. Every one of you. We hear things mean something.